But what I really like about Smarter Science is the way that the teachers are getting the kids to do the science. The emphasis on finding 20 or 30 different independent variables that a class collectively can look at in a short period, I think is absolutely fantastic. And when they talk about getting kids to do an Archimedes type experiment, and you change the shape of the containers, and you change the volume of water, and sometimes you use water and soda pop and Coke, and out of that get a whole set of experiments that the kids could do themselves. That's real science.
I am so much more comfortable with letting the inquiry go, as opposed to directing every little bit of it, making sure that the environment is controlled and people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Much more comfortable with saying, which is the authentic science experience, you know, and I know that from my own experience, but somehow or other in the classroom, you know, I lost that sense of let them go.
Some of the fears of the teachers are that they have to let go of some of that control. The framework provides you with enough of a process so that the teacher always has that touchstone. They know where the class is going and where we need to move them and how we're moving through this process.
So it's a great starting place for those teachers to get kids to ask the right questions and to make their observations and kind of go back between those observations and questions, and then be able to eventually define variables, and allowing the teacher to kind of get from in front of the class and amongst the class and be a facilitator with their students.
In terms of a teacher's control over the classroom, you really have to let go of that concept completely. And you have to be willing for students to do something you completely don't expect.
We're beginning with using discrepant events to introduce ideas and concepts. But what we're finding is that the questions that are generated by these discrepant events are actually leading the learning in the classroom. So instead of me saying, okay, today we're going to learn about this, the questions that need to be answered from our discrepant event become the learning activities for the next day, and so on and so forth.
And so every day, depending on what happens that day, then I plan the next day. So for my own planning, I have the big picture, but I don't have, on November the 12th, this is what we'll be covering. Teachers are always coming into my room and saying, what is going on here? And administrators. And the interesting thing for me, even though I'm an author of the textbook that's on my counter, one of the teachers said to me, well, when do you use your textbook? And I was like, well, when I have a supply teacher, because that's what, on supply days, they work from the textbook. But we don't need a textbook because we're too busy discovering.
Without this support from this organization, it's very difficult to forge on alone. It's easy to fall back to traditional lecture style, reading from textbooks, answering questions, and it's difficult to break out of that mold. Most of us experience this model in our own schooling, and it's easy to fall back to that because that's what's familiar, and that's what's familiar to our students and their parents. And it causes some waves when you try to put a different spin on things. But it's important, so Smarter Science gives us that support.